A big salute and warm welcome to everyone in this room. 안녕하세요. 모두 환영합니다. You are here for the topic Seoul Agenda, Goals for the Development of Art Education, a major outcome of the UNESCO's Second World Conference on Art Education held in Seoul in May of 2010. Now, 11 years later, we are here now. Since then, we hold this World Art Education Week every year, and that's the legacy of the Seoul Agenda. To make it brief, the Seoul Agenda has 3 goals: on access, quality, and social impacts of art education. And we have 3 wonderful teams of presenters to reveal what that really means during this time, this very critical time. So I am your moderator, In-Seol Kim. And yes, my first name sounds like In-Seol, so that works for this session, I insist. I am an associate professor at the Catholic University of Korea at the Graduate School of Performing Arts and Culture, and I'm truly honored to host all of you in this session. So we have little change in the order of presentation. So let me introduce our first speakers. We have 3 speakers for this time: Dr. Catherine Coleman, Dr. Mark Selkirk, and Dr. Abby MacDonald, with a very timely and interesting topic: what happened in art education scene in Australia during a prolonged lockdown and time of uncertainty. So Kate, Mark, Abby, the screen is all yours.
Thank you. So welcome to our presentation. Visual art educations, global threads to connect, entangle, sustain and nourish during a prolonged lockdown and time of uncertainty. We acknowledge that we live, teach, learn and research on Wurundjeri countries and from the lands, sea and waterways of Lutruwita. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities that care for the countries we work, live and speak to you from. We recognise a history of truth is an important aspect of contemporary arts practice and arts education that seeks to teach the impacts of racism, colonisation and invasion on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples.
On the next slide. I can't see it. Okay, sorry. We can't see when the slides change. Anyway, I'm Abby. With respect, I live, learn and work in Lutruwita, Tasmania, on Palanwina Lurini Kanamaluka, meaning the town near River Tamar. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Tasmania and Vice President of Art Education Australia.
And hello, my name's Mark Selkrig and I work and am thankful to live on the lands of the Wiradjuri people of the Kulin Nations. I'm an Associate Professor in Education at the University of Melbourne.
And hello, I'm Kate. I live and work on Wurundjeri land. I'm a Senior Lecturer at the University of Melbourne and INSEA World Councillor in the Southeast and Asia Pacific region.
I just want to clarify, the slides working or not?
I can see them on my end working, but I can't see them anywhere else working.
It's not full screen presentation mode, Kate, from our...
How weird. Okay, let's try it again.
Okay, that's
better.
Cool. That's better. Okay, so let's just start with setting the scene. If we go to the next slide, Kate, I think is, again, so setting the scene. In this presentation, we consider how post-digital spaces have provided openings and pluralities where global, national and local initiatives became entangled threads to complement and sustain visual arts education dialogues and practices as the pandemic unfolded in 2020. While very mindful of the goals such as accessibility, sustainability and addressing social and cultural challenges outlined in UNESCO's Seoul Agenda and the Frankfurt Declaration, in framing our discussion and thinking, we have also been drawn to Gert Biesta's work related to letting art teach, where art education is about encountering the doing of art. This doing of art is an ongoing and never-ending exploration of what it means to be in the world and requires us to establish and stay in dialogue. It requires us to move beyond the ideas of expression and creativity to arouse our desires for wanting to be in and with the world and not just with ourselves, as being at the heart of art education. The very notion of being in and with the world rather than just being with ourselves became profoundly evident in what we all experienced or witnessed in our various ways during 2020 and now in 2021. We also saw amazing initiatives during this time where art educators and students, while isolated in their homes, were drawn in to dialogue with the world through digital and post-digital connections. During the first few waves of COVID-19 in Australia, particularly in Melbourne, where we had 23 days in total of lockdown, it was a period of significant precarity for those involved in the visual arts sector who struggled to survive. In the post-lockdown era, social distancing measures have continued to necessitate limited access to these sites. As a result, many visual arts professionals were confronted with the rapid collapse of their usual communities of practice. In responding to this collapse, we saw how visual artists and art educators collectively and collaboratively embraced digital technologies. They use these technologies as predominantly means to address immediate problems such as retaining a workforce, as well as providing alternate means for community access, learning and engagement. Looking briefly at data from Arts Hub in early March, it shows us the impact of site closures during the beginning of these pandemic. We can see that a significant number of institutions had to completely stop the ways in which art education occurred pre-COVID or shift drastically to embrace innovative and risky modes of engaging with others. These shifts required a rethinking and reimagining of the sites of practice and how placemaking and connecting global entanglements of global and local problems, purposes and actions can sustain and nourish practice during the prolonged lockdown and time of uncertainty. Prior to COVID-19 restrictions, many art teachers were already well accustomed to working with multimodalities across the spectrum of visual arts media. These ways of working were informed by teachers' own deep engagement with art, being it through their own art making or their responding and making meaning from artwork encountered in their classroom and in their community. Many of these visual artists and art educators also embraced digital platforms during 2020, became crucial in promoting a variety of formal, informal, non-formal and incidental types of education, which offered ways for people to make sense, connect, support and care for themselves and each other. To explore these global threads and ways of connecting, we will present 3 short case studies that explore the macro, meso and micro levels of what happened in and across art education during the peak of the COVID lockdown and what we can learn from artists and art teachers' pedagogical and practical responses to the crisis and staying connected to and with the world.
So I'm going to start with the macro and global context and relate this to the International Society of Education through Art. In April 2020, when the World Health Organization reported that over 1 million cases of COVID-19 had been confirmed worldwide, the International Society of Education through Art held its first webinar on shifting visual art education dialogues and practices. Archived as a milestone discussion about the potential impacts of COVID-19 on art education and indicates an unknown future at the time. INSEA went online fast, connecting international communities and facilitating 8 webinars to visual artists and art educators across both hemispheres in 2020. A whole council effort created opportunities for crises solutions and expanded opportunities for everyone to speak and act in solidarity creatively. The shift has created a broad and open dialogue between the sites of and for education through art differently to regional or international congresses and offered a shared site to see common issues, hear stories of art educations and wonder about our futures together. As a result of the digital shift, INSEA is redesigning their website and landing pages to create new ways for sharing and disseminating digital professional learning to global members while providing a site for connectivity, community and creativity to thrive in a digital world. What this digital shift has enabled is a content library, created a place for INSEA to be a resource for our members, driven engagement, and expanded a global reach and membership beyond the constraints of the physical regional conference or World Congress we held in the past. One huge benefit to the INSEA webinar series is how members now have opportunities for synchronous and asynchronous participation and interaction from any location in any part of the world at any time.
So I'll now look at the Meso-Australian context. So the National Visual Art Education Professional Association, Art Education Australia, articulates powerful possibilities and the generosity of visual art educators across the country. As lockdowns and school closures happened rapidly, readiness emerged from this national network to collaborate, share resources and respond quickly to support each other. The Art Education Australia Committee thought it'd be helpful to begin by sharing our top 10 go-to digital resources for remote and online teaching and learning in the visual arts. We acted quickly to build an open source editable Google Doc in the Art Education Australia Google Drive for our communities to contribute their digital knowledge and experiences. The doc was designed with tables that invited colleagues to share the resource name, description, purpose, related outcomes, and the link. Through this shared entrepreneurial collaboration, the Art Education Australia Committee and art educators responded quickly to the need for creative and critical engagement opportunities for students' visual art learning at home, catering for online, offline, and off-device needs. This Web 2.0 20-page digital portfolio is still an open access consumable for arts educators. Web 2.0 is an old term used to describe a way of communicating in blogs and wikis that allows anyone to create and share online information or material they've created. The Art Education Australia collaborative digital learning and teaching space allows arts educators to create, share, collaborate and communicate in one easy site. Turning our gaze to the micro now, a local initiative in the city of Melbourne at the Heide Museum of Modern Art shifted its relationships with families, teachers and students as the gallery became a place of and for artful thinking, collecting and curating new relational connections as works made at home, both locally and globally, were exhibited online. Our galleries such as Heide, through the hashtag movements connected people as artists, opening their closed physical doors to makers, creators, and communities keen to connect and be creative with their time. Heidi initiated support for intergenerational artists, encouraging them to create through Lego, drawing, and clay challenges. Heidi at Home became a site of radical relatedness, citing Barbara Bickle, where intergenerational artists from across the world could make and respond to works, participate in a range of creative learning experiences as both artists and audiences. Our galleries and museums have all challenged us to think differently about the role that we play in an ecology of artists, educators, audiences, spectators, artworks, and worldings. As Biesta provokes, if education is about arousing a desire in children and young people for wanting to exist in the world in a grown-up way, it is first and of all important that they can truly meet the world in its material integrity, not as theory or idea.
So drawing some threads together and where to next. These three examples of 2020 art educations are not in any way exhaustive, but rather are indicative of a rich breadth of people, practices, and places negotiating precarious circumstances created by COVID-19 restrictions. They shifted their art educations to differentiate and cater for diverse audience needs, creativities, and aspirations. It seems that out of these precarious times, many people consciously or unknowingly depended upon art and its worlds for entertainment, reassurance, connection, and stimulation during lockdown. Similarly, digital innovation became a significant enabler in the survival of visual art institutions, industries, and education, and for those people seeking to connect, engage, and participate, to remain in dialogue with the world. We have been curious to explore how circumstances, practices, and proclivities of artists and art educators contribute to the ways we revise practice and purpose during a crisis. We are keen to understand further the connections that can be drawn between their response, contextual circumstances, and aspirational endeavour, underpinning student learning and teacher pedagogy. We also wonder if or how the amazing innovation and connections that occurred locally through digital possibilities across the breadth of visual arts in industry, school, and teacher education contexts to navigate the COVID-19 crisis will endure or be extended as we transition to a post-COVID epoch. What have we learned? Will our thinking about art education beyond the physical classroom change? What arts education practices that were developed during lockdown need to be extended? What previous arts education practices do we now need to question or disregard? Hopefully, we will not just slip back to what we were doing just before. Thank you.
Thank you all for such insightful presentation. I have many questions, but I will save it for later since timekeeping is my job here. And we'll move to our next speakers, Dr. Chi-Hu Lam, an associate professor at the National Institute of Education, Singapore, and an environmental artist, Jen Tae, who is also from Singapore. I must say I loved your job, Zen. For this presentation, I believe we will watch a video together and then we'll talk later. But I was wondering if you, Chi-Hu, would you like to give some introduction first and then we will watch the video? What do you prefer?
Yeah, Zen will speak for a little bit.
Yeah, all right. Hi, everyone. So I'm Zen. I'm here with Dr. Lam Chi-Hu, and we'll be sharing a shortened version of our pre-recorded dialogue on the creative processes and pedagogical implications of my artistic practice. So this shortened video is about 17 minutes, but our full video is actually about an hour long. So she will show you on the screen here the full video, which is on the NIE Care website. Hugh, do you have the website up?
Maybe later.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Right. So I thought that before we actually play the video, I'll give you a little bit of context about this recording. So this recording that we did was at my current exhibition called A Familiar Forest. So A Familiar Forest is a multi-sensory installation that engages the sight hearing and smell to trigger our imagination and memory of a forest in the nighttime. Every element in the installation is constructed. The images of the forest are of urban greenery in pockets of densely built areas in Singapore. The sound of the forest is made with digital noise, and the scent is made artificially from essential oil. So these elements share the art and science exploration of forests, which I collaborated with Dr. Ching Tian-Hong from Duke NUS to highlight pertinent issues with the way we relate to and engage with nature in urban life. So we look at ecological issues of the shifting baseline syndrome, how our mental and physical health are related to our proximity with nature, and of course, how the pandemic we are experiencing today is related to the loss of natural habitat and increased exposure to wildlife. So Shihu will now play the video of our dialogue. So please sit back and enjoy the session. Yeah, if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them after the Q&A. Thank you.
Hi Zen. Hi Zen.
Hello, Shihu.
Thank you for taking time to have this dialogue with me amidst the current exhibition of A Familiar Forest. I'm so glad that we are really embodied in this space. Yeah.
Thank you for coming by as well and choosing this venue for this show.
No, not at all. So maybe I'll just start with a question that we've already kind of begun the conversation a little earlier, and this is with regards to your works and the relation between human and nature and what sorts of scenario that it brings out. I want to understand perhaps a little bit about your general interest in the works in that kind of relationship, and how and why you've defined yourself as an environmental artist.
Well, I guess that is something where has been quite a really ongoing interest of mine. It started, I think, as part of a lifestyle, I would say. Because for me, I think I've always been interested in aspects of nature, studying natural phenomena, just, even just from really things that are around us, like potted plants or wild plants on the streets, or even, say what we're looking at in terms of the sky, the weather, the humidity, and all sorts of aspects of nature that exists just around us. And also then that feedbacks into my way of living as well, so sort of being observant, and I think the art practice as well is one where the medium of art in the making is something that requires time. And I think that haunts as well, or the need for the observation continues to kick in. So I think as a notion of environmental artist, I would say, I wouldn't call myself an outright activist because I don't go on the streets and protesting. Well, that would be illegal in Singapore. But I think, through my art making as a way to kind of raise awareness for that cause of the environment, but also for myself to understand this natural phenomena and the context of that in urban setting a little bit more.
Environmental issues are often quite multifaceted, and it really kind of involves cross-interdisciplinary possibilities. And I suppose that's why you do collaborations, right, with your work. So I'm very interested in this notion of collaboration and how you usually go about it, right? Like who do you collaborate with? Why do you collaborate? And also, what is this process of collaboration? Perhaps you could speak to us, since we're in the familiar forest, this notion of collaboration.
So the ways I think of working collaboratively, I think it has to first begin from having common interests, right? So if we're just looking at strategies of how you collaborate, so common interests. So for us, I mean, we're both as well, apart from being professionals in our own fields, but also as educators. So coming in with that intention that this is a work where we want to raise awareness of the environment. And for the scientists also, you know, to bring the science out there to people. And for the artists, right, I mean, the artist is always sort of like, for me at least, feeling that responsibility to be people to question, right? People to help, to open our conversations through the arts, to remind us in terms of values, in terms of cultural and societal changes that we observe. And to him, bringing that perspective together is one that I think the sciences often don't talk about values, right? So the art and science, so that when they come together and with this common goal of education, help us to kind of bring the steps forward and work towards coming up with a work where I would say integration is the main goal here. And how do we integrate in meaningful ways such that, you know, it's not like you go into the exhibition like, oh, this is the art and this is the science, but, you know, okay, this is the issue that we are talking about, and the relevant disciplines that come in and contribute. You know, in the process of actually working on that, in some ways, sometimes we have to also track out of our disciplines, where I have to know a little bit more about science, and not only in pertaining to environmental medical science, you know, where he's familiar with, but, you know, also in terms of ecology and starting to read up on, say, the shifting baseline syndrome, and then sharing with him what I've understood. And for him, it's also, ecology isn't something as well that it's in his field particularly. So then those conversations will continue. Then even questioning together, I think, the notion of what is nature, what is pure, what is natural. So all that becomes almost like philosophical questions that really question, I think, our own beliefs and our own understanding, and that then bring about, I think, a closer integration and insights between the two disciplines, bringing together then the experience here in the exhibition.
Wow, sounds like a really enriching way with which you work with different collaborators, and I think that's something I believe, you know, as you talk about us being educators, you know, how do we do collaborative work, and how do we do collaborative work that makes good sense in terms of really collaborating in what I would term embodied ways, right, where both parties, or however many parties, you know, come together, but also think within and outside the field, but, you know, coming together to then create this integration, as you talk about. I think that's something that we all strive to go for. I think the concept of luring is very interesting for me, and as I've experienced some of your works, that's what you usually do, right? I mean, the way that you kind of get people into the space by luring them in, and then in some ways the environmental issues would come to the fore. Perhaps later on, perhaps within, or, you know, using texts and so on and so forth. So I'm really curious about this balancing of your self-expression in terms of the artworks and this idea of advocacy for the environmental issues. How do you create that balance, if you will? Maybe just speaking to this through a familiar forest.
Well, I think it is, I mean, different works definitely has used the different strategies as we have already looked through sort of 3 different body of works. But I think for familiar forests, we are really looking, for me, I was really looking at using sort of the experiential, right? So having this entire installation being an immersive space where you activate the sight, the sound, and the scent, and in doing so, to try to relate to people on a personal basis. So by doing so, that is that way of kind of luring people in. And that personal expression, I would say, is subtly embedded in it, because I was trying to relate my experiences of, the memories and the inspiration that came in this work, and also the process of making this work, where I was photographing in this green spaces forest, in the nighttime. So then having people to kind of experience the work through the different senses, allow them to relate to these experiences. And hopefully by doing so, they will begin to then question and think about some of these issues about our changing relationship with the natural world, through how artificial, in fact, this familiar forest is. So I think the messaging, or the environmental message, comes in 2 ways. One being, of course, through the text, where then it is a little bit more loaded in the content, is contextualized from, between individual in terms of our bodies. We'll talk about the science, we talk about this innate longing for nature, which is the biophilia hypothesis, to nationally or even globally, as a human species, right? How, this idea in communities, this shifting baseline, and how we would accept the degradation of our environment because we are so highly adaptable as individuals and as human beings. To this global phenomenon of this loss of, or the degradation of our natural environment because of a rapid urbanization. And then, beyond that, even looking at the whole time period of species as in human beings and nature and larger context of the world, is then looking at this idea of evolution, right? And then putting that in context with this work is thinking about how we are adapting to this artificiality, and enjoying this artificiality is also a kind of evolution, because we have adapted to this point where somehow we're really comfortable in this. Right? And nature as well continues to evolve and adapt because of our almost tension relationship in some ways, right? And the changes in the environment, and 2 entities and 2 bodies, sort of like between nature and human being as 2 entities and bodies, continue to have that evolution or that relationship as it continues to evolve. So I think in multiple ways, I think that this exhibition tried to bring in the complexity of these issues and the discussion surrounding just this notion of the forest.
Wonderful, which then actually lends us to very nicely to this kind of final question that I have, because both you and I are educators in art and also educators in the arts. So I'm wondering about a certain reflection point now about pedagogical possibilities, right? And when you work with the students that you work with, do you bring up these issues as means of creative endeavors with your students, and how have you approached them? Do you utilize what we've talked about this entire time, right? Beginning with personal experiences, going into an inquiry process, working with different disciplines, and then reaching sort of a ready point to the creative work, and then a certain iteration of this again and again. So maybe you can speak a little bit more about that in terms of that sort of pedagogical value.
Well, I guess I think in my almost 8 or 9 years, I cannot even remember, the years of teaching. I think I've tried various different methods, I think, So I think one being, I think quite obviously, is introducing thematically, right? Themes that are in relation to the environment, but broad enough for students to be able to take it in various different ways, but still pertaining to the larger umbrella. For example, man and nature, I think that is a very, very common theme, but and it's also so broad that it allows sort of students to kind of think along that line. But increasingly, I'm also thinking that, in creating themes, we also can kind of start to get students to question then why should it always be man versus nature, right? And so there are different ways to kind of take this theme and consider what applications there may be in what they're interested in. So thematically is one, and secondly is how do we activate students' observation, right? Because I think observation is one in which you kind of have to train, right, to be in that frame of mind, to be inquisitive, right, and to build that is a kind of almost like a practice. And so I would bring students out on field trips, getting them to really just observe just what is in the surrounding, whether it's in the school compound, around the school compound, and just studying certain things, or bring them to the space and then asking them what is it that intrigues them, so asking questions to get them to begin their observations.
Might there be a single message or a phrase that you like the audience to take away from this little?
Yeah, I guess it's really continue, I think, to stay curious as individuals, not just so allowing that, I think, even as educators, I've been thinking of ourselves as learners as well. So sort of continuing that practice, continuing that inquisitive mind, so that as we're continuing to guide our students, that we are guiding them in context to the real world today. And that changes and evolves in our pedagogy, right? Because we are continuing to stay relevant. And then our students can be critical thinkers that can be helpful to crafting our future. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for such meaningful dialogue for you two. A human being is a part of nature, and Albert Einstein once said, "Look deep into nature, and then you will understand everything better." I guess Jen's work of art resonate with this quote very well. Also, her work tells us about how artists can contribute to the society in many ways and offer a very good example of the third goal of the Seoul Agenda, which is the social impacts of the arts and art education. Thank you so much for your great work, and thank you, Chi-Hu, for introducing this meaningful work to us. Last but not least, let me introduce Dr. Benjamin Bolden, an associate professor at the Queen's University, Canada, and Dr. Nerol Jeneret, an associate professor at the University of Melbourne, Australia. So Ben and Nerol, I'll pass the mic to you guys.
Thank you, Insel. So can you tell me if you're seeing my slides? Okay, thank you. Neril, it's over to you to start us off, please. You're muted, Meryl.
Ben, do you have trouble?
Somebody else is screen sharing over top of me, it looks like.
Oh, are you sharing your slides, Ben? I thought I was sharing.
Yeah. No, I've got it.
Okay.
Okay, you do it.
So, okay, I'll just share again.
Okay.
So do you see the slides there?
I'm
or
good.
Just the presentation mode?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, Neril, you please start us off.
Sorry, it's been a bit of a long afternoon, actually.
Yes.
We go to slide 2, please.
Yes.
What Ben and I thought we would talk about, because it's so fresh in our mind, is an outcome of the last symposium, and that is the Winnipeg one in October 2019, where we focused on the question, what is a sustainable vision for the future of arts education? The 2020 yearbook, which is off with Springer as we speak, Visions of Sustainability for Arts Education, Value, Challenge and Potential, represents the work of 27 authors from Australia, Canada, China, Germany, Hong Kong, Kenya, Korea, New Zealand, Singapore, and the United States. So while the research settings are really diverse, as you can imagine, what came through to us was there were 4 key themes that emerged from all these chapters. One was arts education has a vital role in cultural sustainability. Arts education can support and build community. And within the field of arts education, there's an increasing emphasis on honouring voices. And lastly, arts education is challenged by issues of accessibility. Now it's to you, Ben.
Thank you. So we're going to start with some of what the chapters addressed regarding cultural sustainability. And that role was prevalent amongst the chapters. First of all, Generette and colleagues address artist residencies in Australian teacher education as a means to support cultural learning. Tse reports a case study in Singapore of a sonic arts experience for babies informed by Confucian ideas of harmonic attunement with nature and the concept of listening inward from Nada Yoga. Our friend Chi-Hu Lam considers how music cultures are sustained and represented in his case study of the intercultural collaborative processes within a professional Singapore performing ensemble. And Liu and Lau detail a reform initiative in China designed to support diverse indigenous cultural heritage in rural and ethnic minority areas through the teaching of local artistic traditions.
Ben,
The authors are...
Ben, I'm sorry for interruption, but I think there are some technical issue for the slide. So I just got the message from technical team that you need to check the left side of your presentation, and you need to click the swipe button. I have no idea what that means, but that's the message that I got.
Okay.
I think because we're seeing the presenters mode, Ben.
Okay. I'm going to just stop share and try this again.
So sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. I hate to interrupt just the middle of the presentation, but...
No, thank you. How does that look? Is that better?
Yes. Is that good? Yes. Yes. We solved the problem. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for letting me know. So across these chapters, the authors also address the role of digitalization, both in sustaining culture by allowing and supporting its expression, for example, amongst Greek migrant youth in Australia, and in shaping culture and cultural products, such as the Japanese virtual Vocaloid performer, Hatsune Miku. How are we doing now? Are we seeing a new slide? Okay. So community, this is the second theme that we're going to talk a little about. And of course, a number of chapters address community through arts education, both inside and outside of schools. So reporting an ethnographic study, Mortimer explores how cultural differences are negotiated within small town New Zealand dance studios. Yu and Buck describe the growing phenomenon of community dance in China, particularly amongst older women. Corcoran takes us into a Canadian community after-school strings music program. And then community, of course, can also be experienced online, as we saw in our first presentation today. And in our book, this is described by Muller and colleagues' investigation of web-based learning ecologies. Offering a US perspective, Ben Cameron contends that the way forward for contemporary arts education, the way to sustain its cultural relevance, is to reach out and enter into communities, for arts education to roll up its sleeves and take on new, larger, civically and socially engaged roles in society. And the next theme that we identified within and across the chapters was the theme of honoring voices that sang out from the book, often manifested in the research methods that authors employed. Mallows combined artographic approaches with participatory narrative inquiry and heteroglossia to emphasize participant voices in her study of Greek migrant youth in Australia using new media to represent and explore identity. Sajadi adopted an artographic lens to discuss the value of arts-based practices in building and representing understandings of self. Sills explored the drama education experiences of students with a physical disability through a narrative research design that included inviting her participants to compose dramatic monologues that she performed. And authors also addressed arts pedagogies and practices that honored student and artist voices, such as participatory music making in an Australian classroom from Wilson, a focus on learning self-expression through musical improvising, contributing to learners' sense of belonging and resilience from Corcoran, and inviting diverse cultural and personal expressions within a Singapore music performance collective from Chi Hu Lam. And the final theme that I'm going to talk about is the theme of accessibility, which emerged in relation to challenges and possibilities for arts education. Kekkonen examines through case study methods the role of intermediary organizations in facilitating artist-in-residence programs that extend arts education accessibility to rural schools and communities in Canada. Luo and Lau address rural access in China, presenting an example of university experts who support local teachers in providing rural school children with opportunities to retain and celebrate their Yao cultural heritage through arts experiences. Sills explores accessibility challenges and opportunities in Canadian drama education for students with physical disabilities. Kadenda addresses the need for the many artisans in Kenyan's Jua Kali sector to access training in technical and business skills. Cheng and Lee explore the efforts of Hong Kong grassroots initiatives to offer residents access to artistic expressions and opportunities that are not unduly controlled by the increasingly authoritarian HKSAR government. And Kim described their development of a tool to quantitatively and qualitatively measure how well arts education in Korea is meeting the goals of the Seoul Agenda, examining in particular cultural impact, quality, and accessibility. And that's all from me. We'll move over to Neril again. Thanks, Neril.
Okay, we're into the home stretch. We also found that these 4 key themes had sub-themes that characterised the successful arts encounters. They emphasised participation, collaboration, and artistic process over product. Cultural identity was strongly valued, and the experiences were enabling, safe, enjoyable, and authentic. The arts experiences and programs were accessible, often community initiated, and situated in both formal and informal settings. Of course, economic sustainability was critical. Overall, there was a sense of empowerment gained by the participants that links strongly with well-being. And in conclusion, we suggest that the themes and sub-themes and the connection with this UNITWIN we identified throughout the book chapters can be collapsed and captured in this diagram. There is considerable evidence that arts practices and pedagogies at their best support our mission, and that inclusivity and accessibility are critical for this engagement. Similarly, both the communities, large and small, formal and informal, investment and participation in the arts does much to ensure sustainability and development. But perhaps first and foremost, there has to be a level of economic sustainability to support such programs if arts education is to flourish, particularly in and through a time of crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben and Neril. I know editing a book is such a challenging process, and I also want to send you my deep gratitude on your hard work as one of the authors of the book. I am very excited and expect to see actual book. So we have question from the audience, and it goes to Jen and Chihu. So I will read off the question. What is the difference of environmental artist and ecological artist? And that was the question. And who, Jen or Chihu? Who will take this question?
Well, I guess I can begin to speak, and then Chihu, if you have anything to add, go ahead. Yeah, I think for me, I think the reason why I didn't sort of turn myself as an ecological artist is because I think beyond the ecology, it's also about engaging communities. It's also about looking at the various different facets of relating to the environment. So I think ecology is only one part. So for instance, like the scientists that I collaborated with for a familiar forest is actually work in the medical field. So not so much about ecology, but when we dabble into looking at health in relation to nature, we cannot run away from perspectives from ecology. We can also, I think, I hope I answered the question. Yeah. Chifu, anything to add?
Okay, I hope the audience got the answer. And since we don't have more questions from the audience, I think we have a shy audience this time. But I have questions for Kate, Mark, and Abby. I was wondering, because you guys really touched the relevant issue, what we're going through with the coronavirus pandemic. And I was wondering, during the lockdown, I suppose there were some expected as well as unexpected challenges for art educator who decide to give a try in online. And I'm curious, what was your most unexpected challenge during the lockdown, and how did you manage it?
Are you keen to hear from our experience or something that we have seen in teachers in schools in Seoul?
Which do you prefer?
Well, I guess they're different because of the infrastructure needs, and as well as the community, and I guess as Zen was just talking about, the ecological needs. When you're working in those ecologies within schools, there are different requirements and needs to care for children. So in Melbourne, we had 2 long periods of lockdown, 235 days in total, and it is considered one of the longest and strictest lockdowns in the world at the time. It has left us in a decent place in terms of the virus, but there were things that we saw that were, I think, unexpected in school students on my behalf around play and creativity in neighbourhoods, which I think were really beautiful to see. Children back working in their parks together, riding bikes, riding their skateboards. A kid opposite my house using surfboard wax to wax up the gutters so that he could grind his scooter along it. You know, those things to me were really beautiful bits of activism and kids don't normally have a lot of time to do that. They're at school all day, they're in activities after school, and often in my neighbourhood, they're not home until after dark. But they were home to play in the streets and play a little bit like I played when I was a kid, because I'm sure their parents were kicking them off the internet because they'd been on it at school all day. The thing that happened in my teaching, which I was unexpected and enjoyed, was that my teachers and I decided that we would create a mail art project, and we sent artworks to each other every week. And so it connected us in the first lockdown, and then it continued through the second. And I think what's interesting about that is that they're offline, for me, both offline experiences. They were ways to intervene in caring for each other, being responsible for each other, and I think having compassion. And that they to me were really important things. I got to know my students through those mail art projects, very different than I would have if I just taught them every day. Because the little things in the envelopes that would turn up at houses, and sometimes somebody literally coming to your neighbourhood and putting it in the letterbox on their own, because we were only allowed to travel 5 kilometres, and it got them out if they were allowed. So they're mine.
Thank you. Also, would you like to, Mark or Evie, would you like to add something else?
I was just going to, again, being isolated in our respective houses over that period of time and seeing, again, young people, but the notion of young people taking the initiative to reach out and connect in those through materialistic ways, little trails developed or little kind of signs of hope or connection with one another. It really brought home to me the power of the image making or the symbols or the systems that people were using to engage with one another that was beyond what you would normally see, rather than tagging of kind of willful kind of making unreasonable marks on buildings. Some of the mark making became signs of hope or connection, and to me it really brought back one of those fundamentals of what the arts is about, and that was really powerful at a time where we were wanting hope. The young people were providing that for us, which was for me was really powerful.
Thank you. I also had a chance to interview kids for Dream Orchestra, which is benchmarked version of El Sistema, and kids were so sad that they couldn't really see each other, and that was the biggest part of their music education and participating in orchestra. And I think we can find some way how to deal with this situation, I guess. And I got requests from Jen, Tae, and Chihu that you guys want to share website with us. Is that right, Jen and Chihu?
Yes. So Chihu probably can elaborate in a bit, but I'm going to share the NIE Care website, which is where our full video is actually hosted there. So early on, what we watch is just a shorter version of the full video that's about an hour long. So let me just share screen. Yeah, and Chihu, maybe you can describe a little. Thanks.
So actually this whole dialogue also revolves around a single research project that looks at self and society within sort of contemporary artists in Singapore. So just so that everyone can check this out at some point. That's all we have to say. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I was kind of worried, what if we ran out of the time, but we have still some time to talk about our really interesting presentations. So here is Christian to Ben and Nerol. I know editing a book is very challenging, but I was wondering, what was the most rewarding moment for you guys working on this project?
There are so many.
Okay, what was the most rewarding? Just one or two, if you pick.
Can I go? May I go first, Ben? I'll choose two. One was exactly what the presentation was about, that these themes emerged from these incredibly diverse stories and research and so forth. That was one thing. But Ben and I, we are so enjoying working together that we've decided to continue meeting regularly.
Are you sure you guys didn't never argued or didn't have any trouble?
No. Sorry, Ben.
No problem. Thank you. I'll just add that it was, for me, very fascinating to find points of commonality between researchers looking at things in different parts of the world. For example, I mentioned that rural arts education came up in at least two of the chapters, and one of my doctoral students, who I've been working with for 5 years now, has a great interest in supporting the arts in rural areas. And we found, or we didn't find, but one of the chapters was about supporting rural arts education in China. And so to see these two very diverse parts of the world facing similar challenges and those challenges being met through the work of innovative arts educators was really exciting for me to see. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Jen, and also I would like to ask you a question. We all know that global warming is a serious issue now, but people were not that much interested in about the environmental issue even just 2 or 3 years ago. That's my perception. If I'm wrong, forgive me, please. But I guess you feel the atmosphere has been changed drastically, and I'm wondering what are your next steps for an upcoming project?
Sorry, is it directed at me, the question?
Yes, I mean,
yes.
Should I repeat my question?
Well, I think I heard your question.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think for the next project, actually, it's one which I'm actually working with one part of Jurong. Jurong is actually a part of Singapore. So in that constituency, I'm actually working towards producing a public artwork. And this public art is in fact working again with the same medical scientist, Dr. Ching from Duke NUS. So what we're going to do is actually to actually help to educate the public about the pandemic. And also in relation to how, just now I mentioned, the pandemic is related to the loss of natural environment. So this is actually the upcoming project that I will be working on. And hopefully that through that installation piece and exhibition, that the public will be more aware about our long-term relationship with nature, the conservation of this environment, and then rethink about the way we engage with nature. But also understanding aspects of the pandemic, the COVID-19, because it is actually a result of the way we've been relating to nature, and also in terms of how vaccination is being produced, right? Because the vaccine is actually, the virus itself is actually very much part of nature as well. And the first vaccine is also created, from cowpox, and actually, in fact, I was just getting that information as well from the scientists. So a lot of these cures also come from nature. So there's a lot of, so just now you were also mentioning about how man is also part of nature, right, in this saying. So I think it's very, very well put, what you have shared, that indeed we have to begin to think about it in a different way, the way we relate and the way we live with nature. So yeah, I hope I answered the question on the upcoming project. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess a lot of people would ask same question because they might be curious about what's your next step and upcoming project. And Abby, do you have something to share with us? We probably you can you hear me, Abby?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank
Okay.
you. So, I was just going to add back to the question that you had asked us about an unexpected challenge, and just something that I felt was, I guess, being unexpected to sit with the discomfort of it were conversations with people coming in to be arts educators who were seeing how much people were leaning into the arts, and then seeing how the arts weren't being supported at that sort of funding level to keep them open, to prop them up when they had to shut down. And having pre-service teachers come in and ask, what about becoming a teacher and what it was all for, when the arts are not valued in the way that, a real tangible way being supported during the crisis. And they were hard conversations to have, I guess, is something I wasn't expecting to have that. And we counted on the arts so much, and then it was very paradoxical.
Yes. Well, yes, I totally agree. So sadly, the time is up, and we also have Bring Your Own Bottle session coming up. So thank you all for your great presentation. You guys really made my day, and I hope to see you in person soon without mask. Take care, and 들어주셔서 감사합니다. Bye.
Thank you very
Have
much
a great
for
evening or morning. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, and so.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.